Hey guys, welcome to the Babbling Pastor podcast with Michael and
Rob.
there you go, Michael and Rob. Hey, we got some enjoyable topics for you today. I think we are going to dive into a lot of cool things. We are going to just out of the gate though go into some controversy on Twitter. Can you believe there's controversy on Twitter, Rob?
It's actually X. So
Sorry. Can you believe there's controversy on X, Rob?
yeah, no, it's so weird. I mean, social media is not known for being controversial.
No.
So yeah, I don't know. It is a little odd that people would argue with one another.
That reason,
especially like our culture is so united lately that I don't know. It's news to me that there would be any ill will. Yeah, I don't know.
Okay, well, for those of you that can believe it, this is what we're going to get into today. I'm going to pull up our screen here now. Before I bring up what I'm going to bring up, there, in case people don't know, there's like church advertising, right? People hand out pamphlets, whatever, to, hey, come to our church, or they mail them out. And what we're going to be looking at today is one that just went crazy on Twitter, X, yesterday. I commented, I'm going to kind of hold back my thoughts beforehand because I want your comment on it first. I don't want my words to sort of color your vision on this at all. So here is this is the one that went viral. Now there is another side to this as far as the opposite side of the paper. We'll look at it here in a minute. But here's the front. Okay, it was handed out. I didn't know if you knew this or not. Okay, so it was handed out, and this is on the back. This is technically the back side. For a church promotion, it says, smiling wives, obedient children, loud singing, strong handshakes, young marriages, good manners, biblical preaching, reverent worship. That's all I'm going to say for my comments. Rob, what is your take just on this right here?
Okay, so there was a time in our so there was a Sunday morning here. This has been a lot, like years back, right? So probably 4 or 5 years ago. There was a Sunday morning here where I left and went outside after church, and there were flyers from another church all over the windshields of the parking lot.
Are you serious?
That's bold. Serious. Somebody
bold.
Skipped church to pirate people from other churches. I don't understand what kind of campaigning that is, but that's no,
it's not even a mystery about who it is either.
No.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. So anyway, yeah, I guess I haven't thought through the idea of like handing church flyers out or anything like that. We don't do that, but I guess you could say that's what social media is. It's the same thing, in a sense, when you're putting things on social media for your church or even your website. I mean, it's meant to do something. And so I don't necessarily have a problem with that at all. I think it's helpful that they put all the rules on one side of. I'm just kidding. No, I did see this on Twitter.
Okay, I wasn't sure. It went crazy. So yeah.
Yeah, I did see this. And I didn't. All I really looked at was that it went crazy. So I don't really know what a bunch of people are saying, but I can imagine it's like, oh, lots of pressure on all the wives then, or what kind of men would, I'm sure it's that kind of stuff, right? Like,
100% that. Yes.
Okay. Yeah. So, smiling wives, obedient children. Those are probably the two most controversial things on there, I would guess.
Yeah,
I don't know.
It is. Young marriages with a quick third. Young marriages with a quick third.
All right. So, okay. I would assume that the reason to do any kind of flyer would be to tell people about your church first and foremost. Right. And they've done that. Right. So like the flyer,
clearly
it's perfect.
Everyone knows. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't think that there's it seems to me there doesn't need to be an inherent assumption that these are the this is the pressure, right? These are the rules that you have to follow. Like, okay, babe, we can go try this church out. Put your Barbie smile on. Like, I don't think that we have to go there to go there. So I think this list of things should describe churches. I mean, and it doesn't mean that whenever. So I think maybe a misconception could be, okay, there's really no room for mourning here, or there's no room for, you know,
Yeah.
There's no room for you to be going through something and not smile. And I'm sure that's not what they mean. Right.
Are you sure, Rob? Are you sure? Because the internet's not sure. That's what they mean.
Well, but I could see. So if I were going to do it, I wouldn't have done it like this. Okay.
100%.
I don't think that this is as helpful as they expected it to be.
Yeah.
But I also think that, a person would be jumping to huge conclusions. If you're looking for a local church, moving to town or whatever, and you're looking for a church and you run across this, or it's given to you or something, this is something that I personally would go check out. And maybe just have a conversation at some point with the marketing person or whatever, right? Like, I don't know. Like,
did you think about this? Did you test it at all?
Yeah. Smiling wives could, like, that's not a bad thing. It smiling implies happy, or wives that have joyous marriages and enjoy this church body and have good, they have joyful relationship with Christ. And it doesn't, I would not read this and go, oh, wow, abuse, right? Like, I think that's stupid. That's incoherent babble. Obedient children. I think I realize that every person, this is a goal, and it's not always happening, right? So it's also not to be expected that your children are always 100% of the time, no matter what, perfect, obedient things, because frankly, you and I aren't, to our
Amen.
Father, right?
Amen.
So, however, it should be an expectation that my children are going to be obedient. That should be the norm, right? If you show up, I mean, to a grocery store, let alone a worship service on Sunday morning, and your children are disobedient, it's actually detrimental to your witness. I think that, and it happens. Okay, don't misconstrue what I'm saying. Right? It's not as though this is going to be perfect, but if your children aren't by and large obedient, then something is not right. Something is off. Right? Whether it's parenting or whatever. And I think. Yeah, the children being obedient is kind of it should just be a duh. It's an expectation that we parents should have for our children. Loud singing, praise God. I wish that were always the case, but everyone's either a chicken, afraid to be judged because they're not like a professional singer. But I would wager that after the Exodus, after the Red Sea went back down over Pharaoh and they all sang, and it says the men sang, which, is not as normative for us today. I would wager that they belted, right? Like they were probably singing.
They were free now. So I would say you would probably, be louder about that.
Right. And so when we don't do that, what is our focus? right? Are we focused on we're free now? Let's celebrate. um, or are we, oh, the music isn't that great this week, or I don't know. There are all kinds of reasons that people don't sing loudly, but I think in heaven, right, when we sing a new song, like that's going to be a celebration and a half. So, and I mean, I don't know. I think that way about all these things. I don't want to go through every one of them, but
yeah, well,
I don't think these are bad. I think this is a bad marketing strategy, but I don't think, like, you don't have to read into this like, oh my gosh, how did they? Oh, this place is crazy. Like,
yeah. Agreed. That was my point. Like, so my whole thing was this is what I said. So I retweeted out. I said, so to be clear, this didn't come from my church, but it does describe my church. So it's strange that people think that this would be an oddity amongst believers. Oh no, our wives are happy. Oh no, our children listen and have good manners. What a crazy thought. And the idea, again, this came from somebody named Ben Marsh. I don't know who Ben is. I just happened to see his tweet after a line of people had tweeted about it, so I just retweeted his. But his assumption right off the bat was like, oh, this is an ad for abusive husbands. And that was a wild take. That was a wild take for me. Like, again, like you said, it's very, I get what they're going for, but I don't think they realize, like, just optics. I don't think they've thought through like Ben, right? So for example, I kind of got in a little conversation with Ben about why he saw it that way. And Ben had been involved in a whole bunch of like church oversight committees that have had to deal with abusive husbands or abusive pastors. So like he's been in terrible situations long enough that he automatically, his brain automatically flips to that. Not that he's going to not flip from that, but that's why he sees it that way. And so like, and a lot of the comments, like this was pretty eye-opening to me. A lot of the comments were about like from people that had been in what just seemed like terrible churches, like just bad churches. And so because of past experiences, now they're viewing what I would say is a healthy church through really bad lenses. And another conversation I had with some people was like, guys, this is because a lot of the comments, and this just goes to show, I think, from my perspective, I think it just goes to show how much, and just everybody chill out here, how much feminism has really infiltrated the church. Because the automatic assumption for a lot of people were like, what about the men? Is there nothing? I'm like, guys, this is directed toward the men. Like this entire ad, this entire handout is directed toward a Christian man that wants to have his family in a biblical church. That's exactly what the back of that says to me, is that if you are already a Christian guy looking for a Bible-centered Bible church preaching Jesus, this is exactly who we're looking for. It's super niche. It's super niche, but that's
unfortunately.
That's who they're looking for. This is exactly who this handout's for, which would be weird that you're handing out to random people if that's who you're looking for. I mean, there's better ways to advertise on Facebook that will actually specifically get you those guys instead of just randomly handing out handouts and going viral on the internet. And so I think there's just better ways. And so, like my conversation was, I would definitely have rearranged some of these, right? Biblical preaching probably would have been on top, reverent worship second, rearranged a few of these a little bit differently, because I think that obviously there is a point in this where you're sort of sending mixed ideas about like what's important and what's not. But at the end of the day, the core of this is like, you should have wives in the church that are joyful. You should have children that obey their parents. There should be loud singing and strong handshakes. And the strong handshake thing threw people off too. I mean, I'm like, dudes, I live in an area where like every dude I go to church with can basically break my hand because they're a construction worker, a farmer, a carpenter. Like they work outside. They could murder me with just their hand. And so, strong handshakes are a part of our local church. And so young marriages, this threw people off too. Like we won't probably get into a ton of this, but I mean, people just lose their mind. They're like, you didn't wait till after college or after like you establish your career to get married. No, I didn't actually. No, I got married second year of college. And it's been the greatest decision of my life aside from Christ. And so it's one of those things where that's a good thing. People don't see it as a good thing, but it is a good thing. Now I do want to cover
I think though, just real quick, that young marriages bit, right? Like that's
Mm-hmm.
actually a problem in our society that
Yeah.
isn't happening.
Yeah.
That's the opposite should surprise us.
Mm-hmm.
Um, 50 years ago, the opposite would have surprised us, right?
Yeah.
The whole idea was, um, so in the beginning in Genesis 1, when God creates Adam and he creates Eve, he puts them together, be fruitful and multiply, have dominion, exercise dominion. That's the job. And does that mean that every person okay, we're not going to get into that, right? Like there's a singleness thing, right? Of course, but that's for humanity. That's the job. That's the gig. Be fruitful, multiply, so that the image of God, right, the glory of God will cover the earth like the waters cover the sea, right? Like this is part of it. And there's a reason that God made humans so that when they're young, they can stay up until 2 a.m, wake up at 7 if they have to, and function like people. And when they're 40 and they try to do something like that, they pay for it for a week, right? Like,
Amen. Amen.
and God made us that way on purpose. It's not so you can get drunk and party at college and make it through. It's so you can wake up 4 times and take care of babies. Well, that's why God did that.
And I think there are definitely even non-Christian. What's crazy to me is when I see atheists or non-Christians embrace what I would assume Christians would, but some don't. Like there was a tweet the other day I saw that was this 1.5-minute long video of this guy talking about how him and his wife met in high school and went through this kind of their whole life together. And growing up with each other and having kids and just going through life experiences together. And like, I was like, yes, resonate with that 100%. But the dude's not a believer, but he understands the benefit of that, of like the longevity of that and sticking through the hard times in that, not just giving, like the whole thing was amazing. But anyway, that was the other thing. And I do want to touch on one thing before we get to the other side, the obedient children thing, because that was one of the comments too. And I think, again, I think a majority of this, if I'm just honest, looking at the comments from just the one I retweeted, not to mention everybody else's, is that people have this assumption, and I think as pastors, and as lay people too, when we're inviting people to church, we don't often consider like the fact that they are viewing church through all of their past terrible experiences, right? So this is like all of the people are like, well, I have an autistic kid. They're not obedient, so am I not welcome at this church? I'm like, I think you're just reading in to this more than you're meant to. Yeah. The idea, there's a practical understanding of like, what does obedient children mean? Obedient children means that they listen to their parents and they obey, right? And like you said, that's not gonna be, believe me, follow me for a week and see, like, in general, my children are do they push back sometimes? Yes, because they're kids. Is there times where I have to go, I'm not saying it again, go do it? Yes, but most of the time they'll just do it because they know they're supposed to. And that word obedient seemed to set people off because they have this like, well, I was raised under James Dobson and I was whipped all the time. Okay, like but there is a point, and this we can't put this all in this conversation because it's too much. But there is a point where you have to just grow up and say, look, this stuff happened to me. I've dealt with it. I've worked through it, and I'm going to be an adult now. I'm just going to grow up and say, this doesn't define me anymore. These experiences I was through happened, and now I'm going to grow up. And work through that, whichever, I'm not saying you can do therapy, you can do whatever, but the point is you can't just latch onto that forever and let that be like, oh, I was whipped one time, so I don't think the word obedient is good. Anyway, here's the other side, because people were complaining. The other side didn't really, the other side didn't help them out too much, but here's the other side. And so it's Kingsway Bible Church. Our commitments are Christ exalting, gospel-focused, verse-by-verse preaching, conservative theology, reformed doctrine, classic and modern hymns, biblical families, real discipleship, committed fellowship, and the anti-woke things set people off. That was the thing that nobody liked.
Nice.
So that part set like they were going through it and they got to the end and they're like, "Wah!" And so again, marketing team, like I would have kept the bottom one off. Just I feel like that's just whatever. But the rest of it, okay.
I don't. Okay, so I don't feel like. Okay, so first of all, what I wanted to say something, and 1 Timothy 3, the famous chapter, or one of the famous chapters about overseers and qualifications for elders and that kind of thing. And one of those qualifications is leading his own household well, having his children in submission with all dignity. But if a man does not know how to lead his own household, how will he take care of the church of God? And as we've mentioned before on this podcast, I think it's been a long time, but this list is not exclusively for elders.
Yeah.
This list is given to us as a list that should describe every godly man, except for aspiration to be an elder, maybe, right? Like not every godly man needs to aspire to be an elder, or and I would even argue that every godly man needs to be able to teach, at least to some degree, because you should be teaching your family, right? And so that being part of this list, for me, like, okay, well, it's right in the Bible, almost word for word.
Yeah.
And even with a more offensive word, submission. So like, I think,
don't put smiling wives next to submission, because they will lose their mind.
Okay. I'll help people lose their mind real quick. Okay. Wives, godly wives that understand what that means usually are pretty happy in their marriage, and they're going to smile if they have a godly husband who understands what that means also.
Yeah. No,
and I'm not even going to define that or go further. So
we lost all our sponsorships, Rob. All of them are gone now.
Yeah, all of them. All the sponsorships, the hundreds of thousands of dollars. So, okay, the other side. I wouldn't do the anti-woke thing either on there, because I think that what you've done is listed a whole bunch of, like, if this doesn't describe your church, I get, okay, Reformed doctrine, that's, that would describe our church, but most of these things is like, if this doesn't describe your church, then it's, there's a bigger problem, right? Going on.
Yeah.
Anti-woke, I would also agree that if that doesn't describe your church, there's a bigger problem going on. If your church isn't anti-woke, leave. Right? Talk to some elders.
I think
have the conversation.
I wouldn't include that is because of how loaded the term is and what it means to everybody else. Like, it could mean 1,000 things to other people. And so at that point, you're like, it's just not, like you said, the marketing part is just like, I'm going to do some word research. I don't think that's going to make it.
Yeah, I agree. I wouldn't put this on this thing either. But so we don't actively post on Facebook things like that. And it's not the first page of our website. Like, I would assume on this flyer, if you were going to make a flyer for this purpose, this is like the first page of your website, right? Like, same kind of idea, right? And
at least the about us,
this isn't the first thing that people are going to see, but if you go to our website and look at what we teach, you're going to have a document that we've come up with, basically. But then at the bottom of that page, there's a whole bunch of things that I don't know. I don't remember if it's titled influential documents or what, but and then they're like the 1689 confession, the statement on social justice and the gospel, which all of our elders have signed. And and so it's there for us. It's just not like, we're not putting that on a Hillside t-shirt, because that's not the most important thing about a church. Right?
Just huge across the front in like weird biker font, anti-woke.
And actually one of the struggles that so this is cultural here where I'm at geographically, if I had if we started giving out Hillside T-shirts or Hillside flyers, and anti-woke was on there real big, the here at least the kind of people that would attract, even Christian people, are going to be Christian people that I'm going to have to, even more than I do, teach from the pulpit that Trump is an idol at times, right? That there's a whole other side of this that is just as detrimental, and so
You don't want to make your job more difficult than it already is. You're like, I'm preaching it now. I
well,
got to preach over here too.
we have a whole bunch of people who are anti-woke, but I think that the issue might end up being anti-woke, but for what? Right?
Yeah.
Like there's something you're not for. What are you for? And frankly, in that list of things, if you're these things, you're gonna be anti-woke. Like that's just how it works.
Got it. Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know.
Yeah. Well, and there you go. I think at the end of the day, what I came to the conclusion on is, one, this was a really good way to see and reveal people's base theology. Because as soon as you throw this out and get a reaction, you know pretty much where people are, right? I mean, you get a general sense of like, oh, okay, what ideologies and philosophies have influenced you to react in the way that you are, right? Like if you automatically assume wives are hiding sadness or abuse behind smiles, then you've probably been affected by I mean, pretty hardcore feminists. I mean, so for example, underneath my tweet, there was somebody that did like a four tweet thread about how my wife was just hiding her smile and I needed to see the book she was reading and the things like that because it was probably teaching her to hide her feelings from me and yada yada. It was like this big long thing. I had my wife read it and she laughed and then said, "Help, help, I'm being repressed," and quoted Monty Python. And so that was her reaction. And so I think part of, I mean, just to go back to the getting married young thing, like I understand why people are like a little hesitant in that, but I also think that's where good premarital counseling comes in. I think that's where having a good structure around you is just invaluable. I mean, I wouldn't trade the fact that me and my wife have been married for 20 plus years for anything, because getting married young did allow us to grow up together. It did allow us to, I mean, I've told her before, if she dies, I'm done. Like I'm not doing it again. And so it's one of those things where I think we're able to have those jokes. I mean, she knows everything about me. I know everything about her. Like there's just not, it's just, I cannot explain to people. And I think that's part of this too, is that when you have, again, not perfect, but pretty close, marriage, then things like this don't, like, it's not a problem. And I think that's where you do have to, when you are talking to people about marriage and good churches, I can't overemphasize how important it is to be in a good church and to not just date anybody, to actually think about the person past, oh, they're hot. Okay, well, what's their theology? What's their life view? Yes, that's going to develop and change. Do you think 20 years ago, me and Christina had all our theology figured out and what we wanted in our life? No. But being committed to one another and just like growing up with each other and having open that helps. Mm-hmm. It does. And I've seen that there's some people I've married that were right out of high school. Like, they would have been freshmen, sophomores in college, and they're in our church now. 2 babies, thriving, doing great, like learning, right? One of them just got baptized. And so like, it's just, there's a goodness that comes with that. I understand it's not for everybody, but there is a goodness that comes with that. Yeah. And would I use this flyer? Absolutely not. But do I understand the heart behind it? Like the idea of saying like, we want a church built on strong families and the proclamation of the gospel. I totally understand that. I get it. You don't want people coming in here to form your church that don't share your core values. It's just it's gonna be harmful for the church, first off, because there's gonna be this disunity and this misunderstanding of what we're about. And like you said, all of those either are directly quoted in scripture or a byproduct of biblical marriages. So that's my take.
Yeah. So I think that, I think that there's an underlying, when things like this, not just this one in particular, but just in general, this is what you see. One of, I think, the most major problems that is plaguing the church today is that we automatically assume the worst instead of a benefit of the doubt of other brothers and sisters.
100%. Yeah.
And so that's why, whenever someone does, so there's a difference between error and a false teacher, right? I think one example of this was Alistair Begg's thing not long ago, right? Gave some, I believe, terrible advice. Like, I would never say that. I think that he was wrongheaded for giving the advice he gave. But that's not the same thing. It's not the same situation as Kenneth Copeland, right? These are two different men, right? And so I have no problem assuming when it comes to Copeland, right? When it comes to his teaching, because over years and years and years and years, he's proven that he's a heretic and maybe a little demon possessed, right? Like, this is who he's been. Alistair Begg, though, had just years and years and decades of faithful, biblical, to be emulated ministry. And I would assume, other than that one thing that went viral, that's probably still true right now. Right. And yet, whenever that happened, man, the whole world was like, cancel, right? Like, and so I think, that's just one example. This is another example. People read this and they automatically, there's a whole bunch of assumption. And, what I have to do, I think that's important when I think about PTSD, right? From war. I run into people from time to time that find out I was in the Marine Corps. Okay. Find out I was in Afghanistan. Okay. And then there's like this, yeah, well, if I, literally, I've had people tell me, if somebody broke into my house, I'd shoot them, and that kind of, like, just because they know this now, they want to, like, put themselves out there, like, yeah, I'd have done that. And I think, look, first of all, this isn't impressive. I don't care. And secondly, you have no idea what that's like, right? But it would be easy for me to make someone who acted like that feel really stupid. But what I have to do is understand that they are coming from somewhere also, right? Mm-hmm. And not automatically assume, based on my past, a whole bunch of stuff about them and what they're saying. And so I think it's really helpful to go through your own past, your own life, your own maybe pitfalls or whatever, in this case, church experience, and understand yourself, so that you're not going to just put that on other people, on other churches, on, like, there are good churches out there. They exist. Yeah. There are a lot of them, actually.
There's a bunch.
So, yeah. So if your experience was bad, I'm sad for that. But you coming into another church with all of this baggage that's not been dealt with or even thought through or anything, you have the potential to make this church bad for someone else who's coming, right? So I think we live in a world where we all tend to have these big logs in our eyes and can't wait to remove the splinter from someone else.
That's a bar right there. Wow. Yeah. Well, and I think I was talking to somebody else about this last night as well, where I think, like you said, you can let bad experiences do one of two things. It will either dictate how you view every other experience, or you can just let it inform your experience and say, okay, that's a reality, but it's not a reality all the time. And so if you understand that that is a reality, but not a reality all the time, then yes, you learn from it. You're maybe a little bit more cautious in different situations because you are aware that it's a possibility, but you don't assume it. Or you can let it dictate every experience you have from there on out. So every Christian I come in contact like this, every church I come in contact like this, every yada, 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 follow down the line. There's a level of maturity that unfortunately comes through a lot of pain sometimes where you go, that's a reality, but not all the time. Not all, but a lot of the deconstructionists that I know have let bad experiences dictate their entire view on life. A lot of people I know that have left the church let a notably bad experience dictate everything.
Yeah.
And oftentimes, I'll say this real quick and then I'll be done with this one. I'll let you finish out. But if it wasn't so I had the whole account, my entire Honest Youth Pastor account came from a terrible experience. And if it hadn't been for somebody inviting me to the church I go to now, we were out of church for like 4 or 5 months. It was an amount of time. I don't have a clue, but it was months. And they invited us and I went begrudgingly. And I only went because I knew the person really well and I trusted them. And I went, and God used that local church to really reestablish my trust in his people, and to say like, look, yes, this was bad. That's not everybody. And if it wasn't for a good local church really being used to heal what another church did, who knows where I would have ended up. I could have been a pretty bitter person, honestly. And it took a while for me to trust these people because I thought, yeah, people have talked the way you talk before. They've been friendly the way you've been friendly before. I've heard all of this before, but I think there is a moment where you have to grow up and say, not just because this thing happened doesn't mean all of these things are like this. And when you view life that way, you're more cautious, more mature, but you don't, like you said, you don't let that color everything in your day. And I think that's what's really happened. I posted this up, and all of these past experiences and hurts for a lot of people came back, and they can't view what are really at their core good things because of bad experiences before. So, yeah.
So I think too, that we can't get into all this. I realize that, but I think that there's something to be said also about thick skin that we kind of lack in our culture. So if you're watching or listening to this, don't hear me say that church hurt isn't a real thing. Okay. I'm not saying that. There are things that happen in churches that are horrific at times and that should make you feel like crap. I mean, they're bad things, right? However, one of the things that people had a few generations ago that is almost non-existent now is thick skin. I think there was a time. So feminism has done this too. We're much more easily feminine than masculine, even the men. And so this doesn't mean that you need to William Wallace your way into the church, right? But it does mean that as a man, and I would even argue this is a good trait for women to have, when something happens that has a potential to be hurtful or that is hurtful, one of the things that is helpful for us is to learn to not give a crap.
It's an amazing gift. Yeah.
Yeah. To reach a place in your maturity where you can go, I know who I am. Right. And I'm not all the way there, right? You're never going to be all the way there. Your first reaction is always going to be, what? Right. But like we have to we have to get a little tougher. Like, there's some there's some legitimate things that came out of the Rise and Fall of Mars Hill, right? That podcast. So there's some legitimate, like, wow, I can't believe that, there are some people who went through a load, right? That were involved in all of that. Does that need to be like some of the some of the interviews, especially toward the end of that podcast, were with people that I would argue, like, okay, it's been 10 years or however long it's been, probably a lot longer than that. I'm getting old.
I don't know. It's been a minute. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but it's been a long time, like, and this is still not just a thing that you struggle with at times, but controlling you. That's a problem.
Yeah.
Like, that's a problem. But all that aside, therefore, if there's any encouragement in Christ, if there's any consolation of love, if there's any fellowship of the Spirit, if any of affection and compassion, fulfill my joy that you think the same way by maintaining the same love, being united in spirit, thinking on one purpose, doing nothing from selfish ambition or vain glory, but with humility of mind, regarding one another as more important than yourselves, not merely looking out for your own personal interests, but also for the interests of others. And then Christ is the example that's listed, obviously, after that in Philippians 2. And I think that if we are actually doing this, these childish, petty arguments happen way less.
Amen. Yes. Good deal. Well, guys, if you found that helpful, as always, make sure to leave a like, comment. If you disagree, flame us in the comment section and double tap that thumbs down button, because that gives you extra hate points. Just double tap it, not once.
Oh, yeah.
You got to hit it twice. And we'll see you next time. Bye.
Later.